Welcome to Between the Before and After, a podcast about the stories that shape us. I'm your host, Coach John McClernand, and each episode I bring you an inspiring guest with a moving story that shines a light on the power of the human spirit. Before we dive in, I want to let you know about two very important things. Number one, the stories shared here are often gritty, raw, and vulnerable, and very likely will include speaking about sensitive topics suited for a mature audience. Number two, this podcast is also broadcast live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So on whatever platform you follow myself or Freedom Nutrition Coaching, you have the opportunity to participate in this discussion during the live stream. And we encourage your participation both by commenting and asking questions. And so this podcast is about exploring the stories that take place between the before and after photos, not just in the realm of weight loss, but in all areas of life. So let's dive in. All right, welcome back to another episode of Between the Before and After. Sometimes I have to think twice and make sure I get the right name because I do have 3 podcasts. But I am excited for my guest today, Laurie-Ann, and you've got a really cool story to leading you to the place of being contagiously positive because it wasn't always that way. So I'm going to hand it over to you and let you introduce yourself and share a little bit of your backstory.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I love this. I love being on the other side of the microphone where I'm being interviewed instead of doing the interviewing.
Yeah.
So everyone knows my name now. My name is Laurie-Ann Sheldrick. And I've been a life coach now for a decade, which feels crazy to me. Pre-contagiously positive days. That's what I call it. I spent 10 years in the construction industry in project management, working for a large general contracting firm.
Okay.
And that was probably like my second rock bottom was going through that experience.
Right. Yeah.
That was my second. It just wasn't the field for me. It wasn't the work for me. And then I had to make a decision as to what I wanted to do. So I hired a career coach. And by hiring a career coach, I realized I want to be a life coach. Like I want to share these experiences as I went through healing, as I healed myself mentally, emotionally, physically, because we know when you get burnt out from work, you have to heal physically as well. I realized I wanted to teach it. So I went back to school and said, business degree, you can go away. I don't need you anymore. I went back to school to become a certified life coach. And that was transformational on its own. I didn't live in the province where they had the life coaching certification. It wasn't in the province that I was living in. My husband and I had just relocated from Ottawa, Ontario to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, didn't know anyone there. And now I'm hopping on a plane once a month for 3 days to another province to get my life coaching certification. And I had to do that for 6 months while I'm relocating and doing all of that. And when I decided to start my own coaching practice, I was asked by one of the facilitators, one of the teachers, what do you want to call your business? And before I had started my coaching certification, myself working with a coach, I had been doing all of these practices and doing all of this stuff at work. And I was practicing a lot of it on the people I was working with because I was spending 12, sometimes 14 hours a day with these humans. And we had worked together for a decade. And so I was trying all these new things. And like, I don't know if you know anything about the construction industry, but they're not really big into the woo or the personal development or like anything like that. Yeah, the warm fuzzies.
Yeah.
And the more I just stepped into being my authentic self in that space, a man that I was working with, one of the subtrades, had walked up to me one day and he was just in a rage about something else on the job site that was going wrong, which was like a daily recurrence. Yeah. And I just decided I'm going to try some of these practices on him. And so I turned it around, tried some of these practices on him. And he says, you are so effing contagiously positive. I don't know whether to hate you or love you. And so when I was going through my coaching certification and was asked, like, what would you call your practice? What would you call your business? Instantly right away, I was like, contagiously positive. I have to call it contagiously positive so I could tell that story over and over and over again. Because like, I was not the most positive person. So he called that, even though he didn't mean it as a compliment at the time. I took it as a compliment and realized like, okay, this stuff is actually working.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So if we rewind the clock a little bit, we go back to, so did you study business at university? Is that it?
Yeah. So I graduated with a business degree. Always thought I wanted to climb the top of some corporate ladder. That was
Mm-mm.
just what we did. Before that, I actually wanted to get into social work, which is really interesting. And then I think it
But
was
business pays better.
that's actually what one of my parents told me. I think it was my dad. I was probably my dad. I can't imagine my mom would say it, but I think my dad said to me, "Oh, there's no money in that. You're never going to
Mm-mm.
make any money in that. Like you won't even be able to make ends meet." And you right. And I was like, "Fine, then I'll take business." So that was like the first, I think, decision I made that really made me start to feel unfulfilled in the work that I was doing, because it was something that I always wanted to do. It came naturally to me because I loved supporting people. I loved helping
Right.
people.
The idea of social work would have come naturally to you, not business, but you made
Yeah.
business as like a head-based versus a heart-based decision.
Yeah, I was terrible at business. I was terrible at the classes. It was such a struggle to get through the classes. I just like couldn't retain it. I was so bad at it. I was good at my job in project management,
Right,
but
right.
more on the people side of things, I think is what, naturally came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
It
isn't
wasn't
that what,
natural.
like, project management, we think about like managing resources and stuff like that, but I imagine there's a lot of people management that's actually taking place, because you're still dealing with a bunch of humans trying to coordinate moving all these things around and making these things happen, and motivating people to do work and soothing bruised egos. And I envision it as being a fairly masculine space, a lot of masculine energy in there. Or
Yeah, very much so. And it's funny that you say that, like managing people, that's literally all you do. Sometimes I felt like a babysitter. I was like, okay, I'm
mm-hmm.
just babysitting these people. I'm like, all right. And I used to say that like jokingly in some of the meetings, just saying, all right, you guys, like we can all play in the same sandbox and share our toys, like
Right,
it
just
was,
happens our toys are like real life size, like these excavators are full size.
yeah. And here are all these type A thinkers, and I am and very masculine, and I am a feeler and very feminine. I remember doing a personality team work day, and we had to go through the personality assessments, like our colors. And then
Mm.
once we did the colors and figured out our colors, we would all get into a group and we would do an exercise together. I think there was like 50 staff members at the time. I was the only one who was blue. I had no one in my group. I was all by myself, and I was like, "Yeah, this is right. This is so accurate. Like this is so
Just wanted to
accurate."
start singing the song all by myself.
Totally, totally. Because I'm such a feeler. I don't naturally. I don't have those thinking tendencies where my
Mm-mm.
brain leads the way. It's my emotions have always led the way for me. So yeah. So I was all by myself. So I was like, maybe I'm in the wrong industry.
There's a possibility of that,
Yeah.
but I think there's something really interesting here. I mean, so how did you find a job in project management? Sort of be, because I guess you would have had to go through an interview process, and someone would have been like, well, there's something about you that makes me want to hire you.
Yeah, this is actually it's funny because God, if they're listening to this, if they listen to this, my old boss, they would probably laugh at it now, 2 decades later. They'd probably
Right,
laugh.
right.
But I had just graduated from college,
Mm.
and I hit like massive, massive rock bottom, and I had to make a decision to either continuously do what I was doing, or I was going to have to leave town and really get my act together. I knew I couldn't do it in the city that I was in. So I called my aunt and uncle and I said, "Can I come live with you? Because I need some help, or I just don't think I'm going to survive this. I just don't think I'm going to be able to continuously live my life the way that I'm living." And so I relocated. And in that relocation, I went from job to job to job and couldn't really find a job. I'm new out of, I'm just new, right? Like,
Right, yeah.
so I've just graduated, and I ended up getting a job as what I think it was. I think the title was personal assistant to a project manager. And this company, this contracting company, I knew nothing about construction. I don't know how I got the job. And I was his personal assistant, but the company was going under.
Oh,
so I literally did nothing for a year. And then one day I went in and there was a lock on the door and I couldn't get in. That was just it. That was it. Like the company was just done. I would go into the office.
But you were still getting paid.
I was still getting paid. This was in 2010, 2011. And so I was going into the office every single day, but there was no one there. And the guy that I was supposed to be assisting was gone. And then one day the padlock came. So I was like, well, I need another job. And I started to apply for other contracting companies thinking, well, now I have this on my resume. And I remember being in the interview and they were like, have you ever done this? Have you ever done this? Do you know anything about this? And I was like, yep. I just kept saying yes because I was so desperate. I just kept saying yes, totally lied. I didn't know because I hadn't done anything at this other company for so long, but I knew the terms, at least I knew the terms.
What actually did you do then? So you're showing up to work. Did you just like stare at a computer and play solitaire, or how did you?
Yeah, pretty much, because it's not like today, right? This is 2010. Right. We don't have what we have today for social media.
Okay.
I read a lot. I read a lot of books on personal development. Yeah.
But it's crazy to think about. We're talking about 2010. Like, you know, when you hear 30 years ago and it's not like the 1980s.
Yeah, I know.
You're like, what? This isn't right. Something is wrong with this picture here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like I'm aging myself or dating myself. The kids these days, you know, life without social media. You know, like Facebook was a thing, but it wasn't really that big a deal. You know, and all that. So yeah, you're reading books and personal development, and maybe not playing solitaire. Or maybe you're playing Kings.
Lots of solitaire, lots of books. I used to take like movies, like again, like dating myself, like DVD movies, slip it into the computer. It would take forever to upload, but yeah, like those are just the things I did. But it was funny, like it was such a boring experience, but it led me to that other company, which thank God, mind you, I also lied. So but it got me the job and I was really good at it. I worked for this company for a decade. So obviously I was doing something right. I worked for this company for a decade and I met my husband there and I made amazing friends there that are still my friends today. So like, I'm so grateful for the experience. And, you know, I almost think like that had to have been a universal thing that they were like, get her in this spot because this is what she needs to be. This is where she needs to be, because it just had a domino effect on my whole life. But I knew I couldn't go back home. I was like, I have to get a job that I can like afford to live in this larger city and not go back home, because I still wasn't healed yet. Like I still wasn't at that place where I felt like I could be there and not go back into my old patterns and not go back into that old mindset and be okay there. I didn't think I would be okay there. So I had no choice. I had to lie my way through it to get that job.
I appreciate the honesty here, but no, so I'm kind of curious though. You mentioned, I guess it would be just after you got out of university, you kind of hit a rock bottom moment. What was happening in that moment? What does that look like for you?
It looked a lot like, externally, I looked like the fun, outgoing party girl. Like that was my persona. That's all I wanted to show people. Like we were talking about being vulnerable before, and this is what your whole podcast is about. I wasn't a vulnerable person. Like nobody knew who I really was, or that I was in pain, or that I was struggling. Nothing. No one knew that. So I was constantly partying. And in that partying phase, there was just a lot of drinking. Like I worked, I left home in my first 2 weeks of starting college. So I left home and I had an apartment. So I lived in an apartment and I had a roommate. So here I am, like, what are you, like 16, 17 years old? I'm living on my own. I have roommates, like, and all of a sudden this whole world's opened up to me. So it was just, I was a child doing adult things. I didn't have the mental and emotional bandwidth, if you will, to be able to cope with those adult behaviors that I was having, all the drinking. I never wanted to be in a serious relationship. So it was always like just another guy, a guy to a guy to a guy. And even though I had close girlfriends, I always kept them at a distance as well. So the more that I drank to cover up the way that I was feeling emotionally, I drank so that I could feel comfortable. So that I could be around these people, because I knew if I didn't drink, I would be sad. So, and I'm like, I can't show up sad because they're 17, 18 years old. They don't want to be sad either. That was my cycle all through college. So working a full-time job to support this apartment, I'm going to school full-time, and I'm partying full-time every day, pretty much 7 days a week. And I also worked in a bar.
Right.
So as soon as I became of age where I could serve alcohol, I shifted from the restaurant to the bar. So I'm working in a bar and I'm drinking while I'm working. So like I'm constantly partying. And
How did you not get like totally burnt out, or did you get totally burnt out and have some kind of health crisis?
Oh, totally. Like I was not healthy. I was underweight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was so underweight. I never felt good. Yeah, it's funny. Like if I ever did that now in my 40s, I just think like I wouldn't survive today, but it's an age thing too, right? You're so young. And then I graduated, and I'm still
Mm,
in this cycle, and I'm still bartending. I'm not doing anything with this business degree. I'm just still bartending, and I'm still doing the partying, and I'm so depressed. Like, John, I'm
right.
so depressed. Like, I'm like, I don't want this to be my life. Like, this can't be my life. And I was having a harder time to hide it. You
Mm,
just get
mm.
so tired of hiding it. And one day I was out with my friends, and one of my guy friends, who I thought was a really good friend, said, like, what's going on with Laurie? Like, she's never smiling. Is she the devil or something? And it was just
Oof.
this like flippant comment.
Right.
But man, it struck me right. It struck me right in
Hit.
the heart, because now I'm like, yeah, I'm not hiding this at all. And
Right. Oh,
so
that's
kept the cycle of partying. And then one day I came home, and I had driven home, and I didn't know how I got home, but I drove home. And
oof.
it was just such a scary moment. It's always in a bathroom. I'm in the bathroom and I'm looking in the mirror, and I just like, to me, I feel like I just look horrible. Like I'm underweight, I'm hungover, I don't know how I got home. And that was my moment. I sat on the floor and I was like, this is it. Like, I'm not getting up off this floor. And in that moment, I knew, I'm like, you have a decision to make. You can call the one person you trust and get out of here, or you can stay on this floor and not get up. And those are my only two choices. I knew there was going to be a day I would come home and I would decide I'm not getting up off this floor. And that's what I did. I just was so disgusted with myself. I was
Mm.
also disgusted that I was feeling depressed, not just with what I did driving home and not knowing how I
Right.
drove
Right.
home, but just like feeling the way that I was feeling felt disgusting and shameful to me as well. So I needed to get away because I didn't want anyone to
Mm.
see that I was in so much pain. So that's why I left. I left because I was ashamed, but it was the best thing that I could have ever done, because my aunt and uncle like saved my life. And
Wow.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
got the help that I needed and became the contagiously positive girl. Like, who would have
Right.
known?
And I
Yeah.
mean, to me, this is like so fascinating, of course, because I've only ever known you as the contagiously positive girl. And so, but then I think to myself, okay, looking back, is there any contributing factors that you can see that led you to this? Like, is there a clinical mental health diagnoses, or any particular factors that you were aware of that led you to this place of being depressed and wanting to hide it through drinking and partying and so on?
Yeah, lots of abandonment. My parents separated when I was really young, and I lived with my dad.
Mm.
And I always felt like my mom abandoned me, even though she didn't. Knowing what I
Okay.
know now,
Right. Right.
she couldn't afford to keep my brother and I. So she did the most amazing thing, the most selfless thing, and allowed us to live with my dad and his partner, who were doing better financially. So it was a
Mm-mm.
financial decision. And I know how heartbreaking it was for her now, but I felt abandoned. And I lived with my dad, and I lived with
Yeah.
my father and his partner, who were together for quite some time. And she disliked me very much. She really disliked me. And my dad had things in his life going on as well. So I was literally, even like, I remember being like 8 years old, having to deal with adult things.
Right.
And
Right.
so it was that. It was just, it was that domino effect. It wasn't that my parents separated. They had a very wonderful separation where they never pitted us against each other. It was
Right.
all the stuff of, here are my parents too young to be parents, and here's me being too young to deal with these very adult things. And then just feeling that abandonment. So just
Yeah. Yeah.
always going into my shell, into my shell. And so I spent a lot of time alone as a kid. And of course, like just that loneliness just builds up. And again, no one really knowing who I am, even though, I'll talk to friends who I was friends with in like primary school and high school. And they're like, we would have never known that.
Right.
I hid everything.
We sort of developed this way of, just to kind of fit in, of putting on a mask and being something we're not, and I mean, like my heart goes out to like your mom in particular now, like knowing it from this, did you ever have an opportunity to have that conversation with her as an adult where you could sort of do some of that healing where you're like, now I understand the choice you had to make, and you weren't doing this to punish me. You were doing this out of not really having another option. Like, have you had an opportunity to have those conversations?
Yes, my mom and I have a very wonderful relationship, and I hold nothing against her. And I feel like I tell her that so often just because I don't think that's something that will ever go away from her. I don't think that guilt will ever leave her, because this other woman disliked me so much and so outwardly. And so I think she feels so guilty about that as well. And I remember just telling her one day, I'm like, I get it. And thank you for making that decision, because even though I didn't like this human being that I had to live with, this like, quote unquote stepmom, being in a better school district, being able to go to a better school, being able to live in a nicer area, even though like we were still like middle class, right?
Right.
I got to go to better schools. I didn't have to go to schools in the like rougher neighborhoods. And I can see, like, I used to go to school events and see the schools I would have had to go to. And I'm so glad that I didn't have to do that, and that my friends were who they were. So I recognized all of that later. After I left my hometown and moved away, that's when I could see it all. Before that, I couldn't see all that then. Yeah, it was after. And it's such a beautiful thing with my mom now, because now she knows that I am who I am today, and I do the work that I do today because of those experiences.
Right.
It's not that I would choose it again, but it made me the woman I am today.
100%. Like I feel that absolutely. Where was your hometown growing up?
So it's a small town just outside of Ottawa, Ontario, called Cornwall.
Cornwall.
Yeah,
There's like some military there, is there not?
No, it was a factory town that had like a paper mill, and so it was a factory town at the time. Yeah, so, and I mean, Ottawa was only like an hour and 20 minutes away, but it's like the capital and it's a big city. Like it felt huge. So yeah, and again, I think just I couldn't change me while being with the same people who knew me since I was a kid. Like my friends I grew up with, my friends were the same friends through middle school and high school, right? So like you're in a small town, so you just like all go together. And so I just couldn't do that there. So that's why I ended up in Ottawa.
Yeah, okay. And did you do business school in Ottawa?
No, so I went to school in my hometown so that I could afford to put myself through school and could afford to be in my own apartment, because I didn't want to be at home. So that was actually like a moment for me when there was no way I was ever going to take that mask off. There was no way I would ever be vulnerable again, ask for help again. I actually had an eating disorder, and my friends went to the guidance counselor. So I was in like grade 11. So graduating the year later, and I was in grade 11, and my guidance counselor said, your friends are concerned, and you either tell your parents or we tell our parents. I decide I'm going to tell my parents. So I go home and I figure, well, I'm going to tell my stepmom. She seems like a safe place to start the conversation, because she doesn't like me. So I might as well tell her, and then we can work up to my parents who love me, right? And I told her, and she looked at me and said, you couldn't have come to us at the worst time. I need your father right now, because she was having like some dental surgery, and instantly dismissed it. And I remember that. And I remember my dad taking me to therapy, and the therapist said, okay, do you have a problem? I'm like, nope. I have no problem. I will fix this myself. I will overcome this myself. Like, even in my mind, I was like, eating disorder is done. I'm not no one is ever going to know that anything is ever wrong with me again. I will never need help again, which obviously didn't work out very well
Right,
for me.
right.
But yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and it's, you know, I appreciate you being so willing to share, because I think when we understand this backstory, because I think now people are going to bump into you and they're going to meet you and be like, wow, look at this like vibrant, amazing human being doing incredible work with other people. But I very often find myself saying I've never met a remarkable person who had an easy life.
Same.
And
Yeah.
so just, it's almost like there's a, you know, a really difficult story, because of course I think about, you know, I'm an empath, and so just thinking about what you must have felt when your stepmom like said that to you and totally invalidated everything you were going through.
Yeah.
You're not worth the time of day right now. I'm much more important. Like, oh man, I can feel that in my gut. I'm like, that is harsh.
Yeah.
So no wonder, you know, and then so it actually seems kind of fitting that you would find yourself sort of in this masculine world of like a bunch of people who are you know, not really connected emotionally at all, because you'd really been disconnected from your own emotions as well, like burying them in alcohol and stuff like that.
It was my coping mechanism. I had no choice. My brain did exactly what it needed to do at that age to protect myself. Like, again, like even when you're in grade 11, you're not fully emotionally developed yet to be dealing with this stuff. And I had been dealing with adult things my whole life. And, you know, people joke all the time. They're like, oh, did you take home ec in class? I'm like, are you kidding? I was cooking for myself at 8. Like, I'm not like, no, right? Like,
I had to figure out how to feed myself.
Exactly. So you're dealing with adult things constantly your whole life. And like that day, every time I think about that day, I can actually feel myself shut down. I remember the exact moment. It was just like a cloud came over me. I'm like, that's it. No one will ever know anything about me or the pain I'm feeling ever again. Now I'm like an open book where I have to sometimes be like, you just met these people. Maybe, right?
Let's not scare them off just yet. Well,
yeah.
So I wonder then, is there ever a sense that you like missed out on or lost an element of your childhood because of these different things that you went through? And if so, was there ever a phase in life where it was almost like you were trying to recover some of that lost sort of time of play and development?
Oh, absolutely. Again, the adult me who's done so much work feels so wonderful about where I am, but we always have that like child inside of us. I feel so sad for her that she didn't get to be a child and she didn't get to play and she didn't get to have fun. Like she was always waiting for the other shoe to drop or being the protector or being the peacekeeper so that everyone in the household was happy because people weren't happy. And I remember when my brother had kids, I was like, I am going to play with these kids constantly. And I would spend so much time with them and like taking in all their like innocent essence and like, and so protective of their innocence and their childhood as well. And wanting them to play with Barbies till they were 18. And I really kept that. It was funny because when I was 12, I felt like I was 40. And then now I'm 43. And I have moments where I feel like I'm too immature because I just don't want to fall down that rabbit hole of like taking every single thing in life seriously. So it really has like that sadness for that little girl who didn't get to be a child. I do so much stuff now that is childlike and that uses her imagination and cries outwardly and plays with my nieces and nephews. Like rolling around the floor with my nieces and nephews is like, oh my God, I feel like a kid and I'm giggling and I just let the giggles come out where before I would have never shown that. I was like, no, I'm an adult.
Yeah. So, and I think that's such a beautiful thing. You know, I remember in university, I had a music instructor and, you know, he was this like well-known conductor, like quite, I guess, locally famous in the music circuit. And he said his favorite thing was teaching 8th grade music, which for most people, they recoil in a horror at the thought of doing that because, you know, but he said, you know, every one of us has this little child inside of us. And he said, like, I really, it's like the perfect age for him to really sort of bring that little child to life. And he just loved the energy. And it's like, if you can steer and direct and work with that energy, it's like a really amazing experience. And it really stuck with me because at the time I was like planning on maybe being a music teacher, and the thought of 8th grade music, you know, 13-year-olds and hormones and chaos and all, I was like, you know, I don't know how to handle that. But of course, I look back now and I'm like, I didn't really have any kind of emotional awareness at that time either. Like I was kind of the Tin Man at the time. So, and we actually did have a comment rolling in here. Laurie-Ann is a baddie, and I think that's supposed to say OMG, OMG. Well, which is awesome. Appreciate the comment. I think what we could say is that you're an incredibly resilient person and survivor, and in sharing like what you've shared here, you're showing people that like, we can face a lot of difficulty in our life, but it's not a life sentence, or it doesn't have to be a life sentence. And so, you hit this rock bottom in your 20s, you come out, you've done some work, then you make a decision, I'm going to become a life coach. Now that's really interesting because there's a lot of ideas around what a life coach is. And there's probably a lot of resistance even around hearing the term life coach. A lot of people would think, well, why on earth do I even need a life coach, and so on. And then to add to that, you have within the industry, people who've done like a weekend certification for $25 from some, sketchy, like online, quote unquote university that says you're now a life coach. I mean, I've seen the ads, $25 weekend life coaching certification.
Yes.
And it sounds like you were seriously committed to a program where, you were flying to another city to go to school, spending, 3 days a week there and coming back. Like this was no weekend warrior $25 course kind of thing.
No, I was changing my industry entirely. So I knew that I needed to take this certification program. That was the certification program that my coach had taken. So it was highly recommended. And a big part of taking the coaching certification was you're getting coached throughout it. So the first 6 months, yes, you are learning how to be a coach, and you have to like log your hours and do all that stuff too, and do like for free coaching to your friends and anyone who, would agree to it to practice. Right. But you're being coached. So those 3 days, you're not only being coached, you are also practicing coaching others. So it is vulnerable and it is intense. And I knew, I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right, because one, I had to learn brand new skills. Two, I had just left an industry that burnt me out. So I needed to learn new coping mechanisms. And I just knew, I was like, if I'm going to go in, I'm going to go in properly, and I'm going to do it right. And I'm not going to do anyone harm by coaching someone that I shouldn't be coaching. So it was so intense. And also the commuting was a big commitment. Like my first time flying on a plane all by myself, like I'm back and forth. I'm like taking a cab from the airport to like downtown Calgary. I was like terrified. And even that was transformational for me, because again, it's just not anything I had ever done. Like I had just spent a decade in a comfortable career. So I went all in. And also, John, I've been a coach for 10 years. So you can imagine 10 years ago, the coaching industry then wasn't what it is today. I remember facilitating a workshop once, and they were like, so what do you do outside of facilitation? I was like, oh, I have my own life coaching practice. They're like, what's a life coach? Yeah. Like that was still even a decade ago. Right. What's a life coach now? Like everyone's a life coach.
Right. Yes. And it's funny because I don't use the term, although many of my clients have suggested I should use the term, but I'm like, well, I don't actually have a piece of paper with my name on it that says I'm a certified life coach. But I think what we uncover is, first of all, I think coaching is amazing. I'm slightly biased because I'm a coach as well, but I've been on the receiving end of incredible coaching. There's just something about human connection that really helps us to grow and develop. And it's almost impossible to do it without it, I think. Yeah. And the way that I try to explain it is, if we're trying to change ourselves, it is possible, but we're really fighting against a brain that doesn't want to be vulnerable when it feels isolated and alone. Mm-hmm. So how would you define, in your perspective, what is a life coach, and kind of what is it that you're doing?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's evolved. I think a decade ago, I would have said I help people to get from where they are to where they want to go. But now I help people see blinders that we can't see in ourselves. Like I still to this day have a coach.
Yeah.
We have these blinders on, and it's in that support and that connection and being vulnerable and sharing our stories and sharing what we want and sharing the goals that we want to get to, or any struggle that we're trying to overcome that you're hiring this specific coach for. they don't just give you like, I don't just give people step by step, here's what you
Right.
do. It's like a deep connection, a deep support. And then you get to see their blinders and you get to show them, here's your blinders. Like, I can't remember the last time I even said to someone, like, here's your action plan that I'm going to give you.
Right. Yeah.
As soon as they know where their blinders are, they're like, oh my God, now I know what to do. I had no idea I was in that pattern. And one of the biggest things that I do now, because I've been doing it for a decade, is I help people to feel their feelings without taking up permanent residence in them, normalizing their feelings, talking about their feelings, not having shame in their feelings, because that's taken me, 43 years to be able to do. Because one of the things, even when I started my coaching practice, when someone asked me a personal question about me that had to bring up emotions with, it was like, no, this is about you. This is about you. So yeah, now it's really like, let's feel those feelings and get through all of that. So like life coaching to me is, God, it's this like collaboration really, where it's like you're in someone's life. I take it so seriously. It's like, if you're going to let me into your life, I am not going to leave you stranded. Like, we will work together until you figure it out. And if I get something wrong, I will admit it. Like, it was, we are in this relationship together, and it's so powerful. And it's so amazing when someone trusts you enough to share their story, to share their experience. I don't work with people who experience trauma, but I will work people who have gone through trauma while they're working with a trauma coach or a trauma therapist who's trained in that. I'm not trained as a trauma expert, so I don't do that, but I have worked with people while they're also working through it. So it's everything, John. It's so hard to say you just help someone achieve a goal, because
that's like drastically reductionist. Trying to I think of it almost like a guided discovery process, and I like the analogy that you can't read the label when you live inside the bottle.
I love that.
And when I heard that, I was like, I am stealing that. I don't remember who I heard it from, but I totally stole it. But like, you talk about having blind spots, and that's what it is. It's of course you have these blind spots because you literally can't see it. You need an outside perspective. And I often tell my clients, like, I'm a tour guide, but I'm not a Sherpa.
Yeah.
And, I'm actually going to empower you to deal with and work through your stuff and help you with tools to do this, but I'm not going to do it for you, because that would be me saying you don't have the ability. I want to show you how much ability you have within yourself that you didn't realize was there. It's such a fascinating process. And I learned so much from my clients.
Same. I'm like, who's coaching who here?
Right. Yeah. It's, I have some of my favorite clients are in their 60s, and I absolutely love it for so many reasons. I think one of them is that, like, they haven't written themselves off yet.
Yes.
And I go, this is amazing. I'm so excited to work with you because of that. I love the idea of showing people what is possible. Yeah. And it starts with not writing ourselves off. And it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. I work in the realm of nutrition and weight loss and whatnot. It's not easy at that age. So to have the courage to step into that is like really something like pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Now, earlier on, you used a term. So I wanted to come back to that. That's authentic self. So in the world of coaching, we hear a lot of terms like this kind of get thrown around, and sometimes in a cliched sense, sometimes in a whispered, breathy, woo-woo sort of thing. And I really try to, and I think maybe you might do something similar. I try to find some sort of like real, like humanistic grounding in a term like this. And maybe it's not this sort of esoteric, just kind of floating through life, disconnected from the physical experience. And it's also not just being a jerk because you want to be a jerk. So when you use and hear the term authentic self, what are you describing?
To me, if I were to use myself as an example, being my authentic self is, first I had to get clear about what kind of human being I want to be and what I truly value and how I want to live and how I want to behave and how I want to act, because that really helps me to know when I'm in my authentic self. Because when I'm out of my values, when I'm not being kind, when I'm not being compassionate, I'm out of something that like these are my core values. So I know in those moments, I'm not being my authentic self. What's going on? What's going on in my life that's like getting me out of being my authentic self, and oftentimes just an old pattern. But to me, being your authentic self is seeing yourself, all of yourself, seeing all parts of yourself, and not being ashamed at any part of yourself, even the parts of yourself that you don't want to show the world right now, that you're like, I need to change these parts of me. I need to change this behavior. I need to change the way I react or my attitude, whatever it is. And it's like, yeah, you do, if that's what feels good to you, because it's not supporting you, but it's still a part of who you are. Right now, it's who you are. So the moment we can claim that and embrace it, even if we want to change it, it makes us. Someone asked me the other day, they're like, how would you, like, if you had to say, who are you? I'd be like, I'm all of it. I'm the good stuff. I'm the bad stuff. I'm the stuff in the middle, in between. Like, I'm all of it. So being your authentic self, when someone says that, doesn't mean just showing up always positive. And it doesn't also mean that you're never going to have consequences to bad behavior. So someone's like, well, I was just being my authentic self. I was like, yeah, but you were an a-hole. Like, you were unkind. Like, so is that, and I'll always ask them, is that the self you want to be? That's a difference. That's it. If they can say, yes, that's who I want to be, then it's like, fine, embrace it then. Right. But of course, like there's always consequences to our behavior. Right. So like being your authentic self is all parts of who you are. And then asking yourself if you like those parts of you. Like those are the parts of you that you get to work on and to enhance and to change if you want to change. But you got to get very clear about where your values lie first and who you want to be as a human being.
I love that this really centers around values, because we often compare ourselves to the moving standard of like public opinion or other people's opinions, but it will never line up. And so I keep it really simple. I have two core values. There's other values that obviously come out from this, but compassion and integrity.
I love that.
Everything that I do, I try to. Now, I don't live up to these perfectly, and nobody does. But this is the standard. So if I'm going to judge myself in a compassionate way, I'm going to look at myself and say, did I act with compassion and did I act with integrity? If I did, awesome. That feels really good to be lined up like that. If I didn't, instead of saying, well, you're such a failure, I'm going to say, okay, let's figure out why I didn't. What stopped me? And so I think it's this willingness to be able to say, okay, here's the things I'm struggling with, and I'm okay with the fact that I'm a struggling human being, because I still want to grow and improve.
Exactly. We have to be willing to also be human beings. I think so often, it's one of the strangest things. We're born human. We live human. Till death do us part, we'll be human. And being a human being is one of the hardest things to do, because there's so much external noise. There's so much externally telling us, this is how you should act. This is what you should believe. This should be what you think. And it's like, yeah, but to be authentic, we really need to figure those things out for ourselves. We really need to go through that ourselves. And we can't do that if we're not willing to look at the parts of ourselves that we ourselves don't like. And that's so important. Like I used to have, I'm Italian. So I have hot-blooded Italian temper. That used to be my default response, John. It was just be like, that's just me. I'm Italian and I got a hot-blooded temper. And I remember one day my husband, who's so calm and so chill, and he just was like, yeah, that doesn't jive with me. I don't like it. And I knew, he's my husband now, but 20 years ago when we were first dating, he was like, no, this is not the type of person I want to be with. I had to look at that part of myself and be like, well, isn't that convenient for me to just say all Italians have a temper? Not to say that my temper doesn't get the best of me today, but not the way it used to. Now it's like, it's quick, it's gone. I'm like, oh my God, sorry, that was bad behavior. So it's like stepping away from those excuses. But again, had to get clear about what kind of person I wanted to be. And sometimes, like my husband mirroring that back to me, again, it's like I had blinders on. I didn't realize that this was bad behavior. So someone kind and compassionate about it, telling me like, no, I'm sorry, like this just doesn't work for me, helped me to see if this is how I wanted to continue.
That was a good time to slightly freeze there. Yeah.
Oh,
there we go.
There
back. We go. that was a really good expression to be
Yeah,
frozen on.
yeah. So that's Jolene's energy. She's high energy. So I was talking about, so my girlfriend Jolene is a personality expert. And I don't know if we got cut off before this, but she says you can't change your personality, but you can always change your behavior. And that is something that really sticks with me. But we have to get clear about who we want to be.
Right. So just as we wrap up here, contagiously positive. Does that mean positive all the time, or what does that mean for you?
No, to me, contagiously positive is I want to be positive in a real way. And the only way to be truly, really positive about life is to also feel all the other feels.
Right.
So contagiously positive is the girl I want to be. She's who I want to be. So when life isn't going the way I want it to, when life happens as it happens, when I'm going through challenges, when I'm in a negative mindset myself, whatever it is I'm experiencing, I always turn back to, I'll ask myself, I'm like, what would the contagiously positive girl do? She is that person that I want to be. She's the values, the person who mine are kindness and compassion. And if I'm not being kind and compassionate, then it's an opportunity for me to go within and be like, how would she react? So I'm not positive all the time. I feel all the feels and I feel them deeply. And that's something that I talk about so often on all my platforms with all my clients. Everything that I put out there is always like, and by the way, you're a human being. You will never stay in joy 24/7. It's wonderful to know what brings you joy, but we also need to know, what do we do when we're out of joy? What do we do when a global pandemic hits and our lives are thrown up in the air? What can we do to support our mental and emotional health so that then we can go back to that state? So I asked someone once, I was like, forget about being positive all the time. If you were to give yourself a term, like that guy called me contagiously positive, what would it be? Who would you strive to be in those moments when you're not living, by your values, like we've been talking about, and being who you want to be or behaving the way you want to behave? Because we all have those moments.
Yeah. So before I get some words of wisdom from you, where do people find you if they want to learn more about what it is that you do?
So everything can all be found on my website, contagiouslypositive.ca. I'm Laurie-Ann Sheldrick on Instagram, which is brand new. I was Contagiously Positive, but someone took the name and was doing stuff and pretending to be me. So now I'm Laurie-Ann Sheldrick on Instagram. I'm Contagiously Positive with Laurie-Ann Sheldrick on Facebook, and then my website. Those are the places I spend the most time. A lot on Instagram and Facebook. I do a live every single Friday where we do a weekly coaching, and I send out weekly coaching emails. So on those two platforms are the best places.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that those get included in the show notes as well. And you probably, for those watching live, they should be down in the description as well. So just to tie everything together with a nice little bow, if you were to summarize, maybe some of your life experience in a nugget of wisdom that people could take away that's actionable, what would you like to share?
Don't give up. Don't give up. If you haven't found the coach or practice or principle or method or healing modality, if you haven't found it yet, don't give up. That person's out there. That book is out there. That podcast is out there. It's out there. That thing for you is out there. That's the one thing I would say. No matter how hard it gets, don't give up, and get the support in whatever way you can, even though it's really scary. And if someone dismisses it, like was for me that one time, there's someone right there, right behind them being like, I'll support you, like putting their hand up saying, I'll support you. That's the biggest thing. Never give up on taking care of your mental and emotional health, on your life, on what you desire. Because there's so much on the other side. And that doesn't take away from any future challenges, but it does help you to understand that, okay, I can get through this because I've been through worse.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing today. It's been such a pleasure having you on.
It was all my pleasure, John. Thank you so much for this conversation. I could speak to you for hours. I love this.
We'll have to do this again sometime.
I would love to. I would love
Awesome.
to. You'll come on my podcast.
I will.
And you'll be the first man on the Sisterhood podcast.
I would embrace that.
I know
amazing.
you would.
So,
that's why. So you will be the first.
That's awesome. And thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Let's have a fantastic week.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Before and After. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, or leave a review, because that helps this podcast to reach and inspire more people. I love exploring the stories that take place between the before and after, the powerful experiences that shape who we become. And I love human potential. I love the possibilities that lie within us. So whatever you may be up against, I hope these stories inspire you, because if you're still here, your story's not done yet, so keep moving forward.
Anyone can come from any place of brokenness and destitution and build an amazing life.